Hello again, friends, and welcome back to United Monologue. It's time for another little chat about the wonderful world of Manchester United. It's been a week. It's been a weird, long, difficult week after the defeat at Tottenham. And we've got Everton coming up this weekend. I can't say I'm really looking forward to it, but a game's a game, and we're going to make it work, I'm sure. Really hope we'll see some of the youngsters this weekend. We've got a few things to talk about, I suppose, following on from the game last weekend and the stories that have been occurring in the media over the week. I want to talk a bit about the club's finances, the financial reports that came through. I want to talk a bit about the manager and the first serious sort of rumblings that there might be a change in the offing. I mean, it seems insane after 3-4 months, but there's been reports this week that INEOS are looking for new managerial candidates, which would be an unbelievable development. Imagine if Amorim got pushed. Anyhow, lots of talk from pundits after the game that, you know, he's just got to change that system. He's being stubborn. He's got to make a change. Let's talk about that. Let's start there, in fact. If you're Amorim and you lost your 8th Premier League game out of 12 or whatever it is now, you're going to feel a bit concerned, I'm sure. And I did say last week that I think there's a good argument that he should have brought a bunch of the kids on, if not at half time, then pretty soon after, because it seems like there was not a lot to lose by doing that and so much to gain. I'm not quite sure why he did that, and maybe we'll see if he includes a lot of kids this weekend, that last demonstration of the inadequacy of the senior squad paves the way for a stronger plan with the youth going forward. But if you're Amorim, you've got to think this is not going well. And he's on record as saying, it's my way or the highway. I'm going to do this 3-4-3 thing. I'm going to do my plan. And if it doesn't work, I'm going to get the sack, and that's an end of it. He's not going to try and make compromises. And I really admire that, first of all. I like that a lot. I think more people should do that more of the time. They should have a vision. They should think it through in advance, of course, and they should really know what they're doing. But if they have an idea, they should stick to it. They should see it through and face its consequences with a strong chin or whatever. So I like that Amorim said he's going to stick to this. I like that he appears to be sticking to it, at least in terms of formation and basic structure. The team going out is looking the same each time. The way that it acts in game has been quite erratic, particularly in midfield. I think personnel is just the biggest difference there. You saw some of the sort of Ten Hag gaps in midfield against Spurs last weekend. And I think that's just a symptom of not having a well-balanced pair in there. Casemiro did some good work mopping up where he could, but he can't cover the ground. And Bruno did some good work spraying passes, but he can't hold the ball. And so finding a balance there, Ugarte and Kobbie Mainoo in there seem a better balance for those two roles than Casemiro and Bruno, who are both kind of extreme specialists. Bruno playing as a creative quarterback and Casemiro playing as a aging holder, I suppose. So that's a personnel thing, I think. And I think that's the way we've all got to try and see Amorim's system and Amorim's plan, is that he's holding place in a formation and in a structure and in a plan for the right personnel to come in time. And I kind of feel like he's thinking the same as me. It doesn't really matter if you win 3 games or 5 games or 1 game between now and the end of the season. It's very unlikely the club's going to go down. It's very unlikely we'll be playing in the Championship next year. It's just the difference between finishing 11th and 15th or 16th, and I know there's a lot of prize money that is at stake there, and I know it's not trivial whether you win games or don't win games. I know that matters to a lot of people for a lot of reasons, and there's good reason. I don't want to sort of overblow my silly argument that it would be a great laugh to get relegated, because there's a lot of real consequences to failure, even in the short term. But I think what Amorim's doing is establishing a bigger picture. He's trying to make clear that this is the shape of what we're going to do, and we're going to need to find the pieces that fit this puzzle board here. And that could be a good thing, but it relies on development of the squad, whether that's through youth coming in or new players being bought, or just other players, existing players, learning the ropes. We look at Dalot and think maybe he should be a reasonably good right wing back, or I suppose left wing back. He does these inverted wing backs quite a lot, Amorim, doesn't he? But he's not showing it yet. Maybe if he gets enough training sessions and enough time, he'll start to become a passable wing back. So far, he's been not quite passable. And the same's true for, there's been a lot of talk about Rasmus Højlund this week and in recent weeks. He's not been scoring. Obviously, that's not good for a 9. And there seems to be a lot of raw materials in Rasmus Højlund that would make a good striker in this system. He's somewhat reminiscent of Gyökeres, and Amorim made Gyökeres a fantastic component in that system at Sporting. Gyökeres has his, credit there as well. But it feels like some players that are already at the club could develop into useful pieces in this system. Obviously, the youth coming through, we hope, will be a part of it, and we hope that in the summer there will be some money for transfers. And that brings me beautifully, smoothly, impressively on to the next issue, which is finances. We've been hearing a lot about the club's financial position this week, and there's been a quarterly report not making as much money as we did this time last year. Obviously, fewer European games or less lucrative European games. And concerning position in the league means less commercial revenue. It means less people buying merch and shirts around the world, I expect. But the club has been doing some extreme cost cutting in the last few months. There have been more redundancies announced. People are losing their jobs. People are paying more for tickets. The cash flow situation seems to be if not an obsession, at least a point of focus for INEOS. And I think that's what a lot of the transfer business in January was about as well, moving Rashford's wages largely off the books, moving Antony out of the focus. And I think in the summer that will continue to be a focus. Casemiro's a big, important question mark there. And he's out saying he wants to stay this week. I'm sure he does. It'd be really cool, I think, if Amorim could sit down with Casemiro, for example, and have a man-to-man, have a chat and say, look, you're not getting any younger, but you want to stay. I want you to stay for the value you can bring here. But what is that value? You're not the player you were 5 years ago for whatever reason. What can we do? Players can adapt, Giggs and Rooney and etc. We've seen players change their game in their later career. And whether it's in terms of playing time, whether they can agree that Casemiro will play half as many minutes as he might have liked to, but play them really well, or a role thing, whether he can establish a specific limited role within the team. Because players like Casemiro should be good to have around. And if you're going to pay the kind of money that the club's paying for the wages for a player like Casemiro, you've got to find a way to make use of them. You've got to find a way to make them a net positive in the squad, even if it's just in kind of leadership roles and making them feel good about stewarding younger players through into the team at this stage of their career or something. Anyway, that's a slight sidetrack. The club's trying to find money because it needs it. And it's interesting to see that even if the PRS, the sort of the rules-based position changes for United and theoretically we would be allowed to spend in the summer, it's not absolutely clear that the club has any money to spend. Made it very clear in last week's video about what are we united about, that we should all be united in our complete distaste for what happened in 2005 with the Glazers takeover. This week we've had a really clear reminder of why the total interest payment amount over the 20 years they've owned the club has tipped over $1 billion. And that's not including fees and refinancing charges and dividends paid to the owners and ancillary costs and so on, and the general cost of poor management of Ed Woodward's salaries and bonuses and etc., right? So the total negative net cost of Glazer ownership is astounding and continues to rise. And the club, despite losing all that money, is more in debt than it was in 2005. We owe more in principal debt amount, and we owe also hundreds of millions in transfer fees outstanding. So there's a position we're in now which is kind of frightening. And I don't know the finances intimately. Obviously, I don't work at the club. I'm not a finance professional. But just on very broad brushstrokes from a layman's perspective, if you're making total kind of operating revenues in the hundreds of millions, 400, 500, 600 million, and you owe over $1 billion, the interest alone on that debt is going to be a sizable portion of any profit you are able to make in a given financial year. And if you want to spend 100 million, 200 million, 300 million on transfers across a window or two, as United have in previous windows, that money needs to come from somewhere. And the revenue is way less than the total debt. The profit from that revenue, because it's not free to run a football club, the wage bill alone for the players consumes a large proportion of that revenue. So the available money, I mean, United's been operating at a loss for several years, which is why there's a problem with PRS. And this is not going to turn around quickly, is the point. However unpleasant it is for us as fans to see donations to charity, ambassadorial roles for former players and managers going, ticket prices rising, I think there's probably, in theory, a bigger picture plan there, that the club is in absolutely unsustainable financial direction and it needs changing. So I hope that they know what they're doing, and I hope that whether it's in this next window or the window after that or the window after that, we are able to spend money that we have actually made rather than the rolling credit facility or whatever it's called, and spending money that we don't have. The club doesn't need more debt. I think that's a really fundamental issue that fans should be fighting over. I think we should be fighting for a full sale, the total removal of the Glazers, and we should be fighting for repayment of the debt, removal of the debt, your debt, not ours, and all that. You can't force the Glazers to pay it back. I don't think there's any reason they would do that. But the club itself is the fans. It's the people that love the club, and they are currently holding responsibility for a debt that isn't theirs. It's a shame, but it's a reality. I think it's going to be a long, hard road back to a good financial position. I think that's a longer road than potentially the turnaround on the field. So I'm interested in that. Don't really know a lot about it, but money's quite basic when you nail down the issues. You've got a certain amount, you bring in a certain amount, and you send out a certain amount. And United's cash position has been getting worse and worse. There's less and less money in the club. The expenditure has been going up and up and up over the last 10 years, let's say. And the revenue now is significantly receding after years of underwhelming growth, largely due to the past successes of the club, the ability of the club to increase revenue fractionally over the last 15 years has been supported by Sir Alex's great work over the years and the success of the club. But we've seen other clubs, City, Liverpool, Chelsea, Newcastle, Villa, Brighton, increasing revenues by massively larger factors than United have been able to, and overtake United. And now we're not winning anything, we're not looking good, and the revenues are actually dwindling because we're not in the Champions League and the stadium's falling apart and people are buying, kids are buying City shirts. I live in Sweden, right? And I see at the shops little kids walking around in Liverpool shirts and City shirts and PSG shirts. And I think, where are the United shirts? And the answer is, these little kids, they don't think United are great. They don't think they're cool. They weren't born when we were great. So it's there for everyone to see. The global value of the brand is diminishing. So what is my point? I think we as fans need to be very patient and very calm and consistent in a couple of simple messages. That's the other thing that's been kind of in the news cycle this week, protests. There have been new calls for protest around the club and around the full sale aspect. It's about time, a lot of people think, that INEOS figure out whether they're going to take over completely or not and oust the Glazers or not. Avram Glazer was asked by a journalist, are you going to sell Manchester United? He just replied, no. And it's not good news, man. We want them out. We want them out. So consistency around the message of get rid of the Glazers, however that happens, just get them out. Want them gone. Want them in the rearview mirror. That episode is criminally problematic in the club's history, and we want it in the club's history, not in the club's present. Removal of the debt, I think, has to be a massively important message that the fan base calmly and consistently is behind. Because again, I go back to what I said last week. What are we united about? I think if we're arguing about patterns of play on the pitch, that's great, but it's distracting us as a group from the key message, which is structurally and in terms of the sort of macro issues at the club. We don't want that stuff going on. We don't want debt hampering the club and weighing it down. And the smaller picture stuff, the stuff that we actually find fun and interesting and that we care about, which players are on the pitch week to week, what shape are they playing, how are they going about their business, that stuff follows from the bigger picture stuff. And if you create the right environment, then that kind of stuff can grow and flourish. And I think fundamentally that's been the problem at Manchester United for too long now, that the big picture has been fading and crumbling and falling apart. And so naturally the smaller details have been going with it over time. The last thing I would like to touch on is Raphael Varane's interview this week with The Athletic, which highlighted something I think is very important. He saw, in comparison to his experience at Real Madrid, perhaps the only other club in the world that can compare seriously to United, maybe Barcelona. He said there's a structure in place at Real Madrid. There is a clear designation of responsibility. You know whose job it is to do this and whose job it is to decide that. And the players are protected by that structure. The captain of the team is not expected to decide the manner of play. That clearly is designated to the management. The recruitment is clearly designated to its department. And he says that the same kind of clarity is not in place at United. And that sounds completely plausible to me. That echoes with what I think we see, that from year to year, season to season, United have not had a clear functional structure in place that allows decisions to get made for a long-term plan that works, and we thought we were seeing that coming into place with INEOS in the first place, hiring football executives, Dan Ashworth coming and then going. We hope that is a better reality in future. But those big picture issues absolutely drive the smaller details. And so we won't see a better result on the pitch until we see the big picture coming back into focus. I think Varane is absolutely right about that. So thank you very much for watching. It's always a pleasure to just chat and think about United stuff. I hope we'll have some real positivity to think about next week. I hope we'll see some kids doing some great stuff this weekend. And I hope we can just talk about that next week. That'll be fun. For now, click like, click subscribe, and I'll look forward to seeing you again. Leave me a comment. Tell me what you think about all this stuff. Until then, goodbye. Thank you.